The alert came through every defense network on Earth simultaneously, triggering protocols that had been theoretical until that moment. In Geneva, inside the underground facility that housed United Earth Defense Command, Admiral Torres was reviewing supply reports when her entire wall of screens went dark. Then blazed red with a single message: extraterrestrial signal detected. She was running before her mind fully processed what she was seeing. Down the corridor, past security checkpoints that opened automatically for her, into the primary analysis room where 24 technicians stared at their displays with expressions of pure shock. General Park was already there, still wearing his gym clothes, sweat cooling on his forehead. "Tell me this is real," Torres said. A young analyst named Wilson turned in his chair, his hands trembling slightly as he gestured at the main screen. "Ma'am, the signal originated from outside our solar system. The mathematical structure is clearly artificial. We have been translating it for the past 40 minutes using the linguistic frameworks we developed from the old probe data. It is a message. Someone is talking to us. The probe. Humanity had found it 30 years ago, drifting in the asteroid belt. Ancient technology, damaged but functional enough to provide insight into faster-than-light travel and basic translation matrices. Earth scientists had spent decades reverse engineering it, achieving their first successful FTL jump just 2 years ago. Until this moment, they had believed themselves alone in practicing interstellar travel." Torres read the translated message displayed across the screen. Simple words that carried the weight of extinction. A species called the Ralnathi, facing something called devourer swarms. 17 civilizations already consumed. A plea for help from anyone listening. "They sent this to us specifically," Park said, his voice quiet. "They know we exist. They know we achieved FTL capability, and they are desperate enough to ask for help from a species that just barely figured out how to leave their own system." Torres studied the star charts that accompanied the message. The Ralnathi homeworlds were 8 months away at Earth's current FTL speeds. The data included tactical information about the swarms, hive mind organisms that consumed biological matter and adapted to any weapon used against them. 17 civilizations. The number kept echoing in her mind. "We need to convene the Security Council," she said. "Everyone. Now." 6 hours later, representatives from every nation on Earth sat in the emergency session chamber. The room was designed for crisis, stark and functional, with no decoration except the Earth flag hanging behind the primary podium. Torres stood at that podium now, having just finished presenting everything they knew about the message. The room erupted in argument. Some delegates insisted Earth should remain hidden, that revealing their presence would invite danger. Others argued this was a trap, that no species would genuinely ask for help from a world they knew nothing about. A few suggested it might be a test from some advanced civilization, watching to see how humanity would respond. Ambassador Liu from the Eastern Coalition stood, commanding silence with her presence. She was 70 years old, had lived through the Unification Wars, and carried scars from the nuclear exchange that nearly ended human civilization in 2047. "I was 15 when the bombs fell," she said. "I watched my city burn. I spent 2 years in refugee camps, convinced humanity had finally killed itself. But we survived. We learned. We chose peace over extinction. Now we sit here, safe in our solar system, debating whether to help another species facing what we nearly became. What does that say about who we are?" A delegate from the African Union shook his head. "With respect, Ambassador, we have 30 ships capable of interstellar travel. 30. Against an enemy that destroyed 17 advanced civilizations. We would be sending our people to die for strangers who might already be gone by the time we arrive." "Then we die trying to help," said General Park from his position near the back wall. Every head turned toward him. "We spent 50 years building weapons to kill each other. Nuclear weapons. Biological weapons. Things designed specifically to erase human life from existence. Then we spent 30 years learning to build differently, to unite, to reach for space instead of each other's throats. What was the point of all that growth if we hide the moment someone needs what we have become?" Torres added her voice. The message included technical data. The swarms adapt to energy weapons, but their adaptation to kinetic weapons is slower. They have never faced nuclear weapons in the configuration we use them. They have never encountered tactics developed by a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare. We may actually have advantages they do not expect. The debate continued for 3 more hours. Votes were called, arguments made and countered. In the end, the decision came down to a simple question posed by Ambassador Liu. Will we be the species that hides in safety while others die, or will we be the species that stands when someone calls for help? The vote was not unanimous. It was not even close. But it was enough. Earth would send a fleet. The assembly happened faster than anyone thought possible. 30 ships was Earth's total FTL-capable fleet, built over 2 years at enormous expense. They were not warships in the traditional sense. Earth had designed them for exploration and defense of the solar system. But they carried weapons humanity knew very well how to use: nuclear missiles, kinetic railguns, torpedoes that could punch through asteroids. Everything learned from centuries of preparing to fight each other. Lieutenant Commander Diana Reed received her orders while training Marines in the Arctic facility. She was 34, a veteran of the Unification War's final campaigns. A woman who had seen the absolute worst of human violence and carried scars both visible and hidden. When they told her she would lead the ground forces for humanity's first contact with alien life, she laughed until she realized they were serious. "You want me to take Marines to fight aliens?" she asked Admiral Torres during the briefing. "I want you to take Marines to save aliens," Torres corrected. "There is a difference." Diana looked at the tactical reports, the images of the swarm organisms, the data on 17 dead civilizations. "Ma'am, we have no idea what we are walking into. This could be a slaughter." "It could," Torres agreed. "But you have trained soldiers to fight in every environment Earth offers. You have led people through impossible situations and brought them home. These Ralnathi are facing their last days, and we are the only ones who answered their call. I need someone who understands what it means to fight when everything is at stake." Diana was quiet for a long moment, thinking of the burning cities from her youth, the friends lost, the choice her generation made to end the cycle of violence. Then she nodded. "When do we leave?" 3 weeks, Torres said. "We are loading supplies now. 30 ships, 4,000 personnel. Everything we can spare without leaving Earth defenseless. It is not much compared to what the Ralnathi are facing." "It is what we have," Diana said. "That will have to be enough." The fleet gathered in orbit above Earth, visible from the surface as a constellation of new stars. People across the planet watched as the ships prepared for departure, knowing many might never return. News broadcasts debated the decision endlessly. Some called it humanity's finest moment. Others called it reckless suicide. Diana stood in the launch bay of the ship designated as the fleet flagship, watching her Marines load equipment. They were young, most of them, born after the Unification Wars, raised in a world that had chosen peace. But they trained like their parents' generation because peace, they had learned, was something you had to be strong enough to protect. Admiral Torres appeared beside her, hands clasped behind her back. "Second thoughts?" "1,000 of them," Diana admitted. "But we are still going." "Good," Torres said. "Because someone needs to show the galaxy what humans do when they hear a cry for help. We do not hide. We do not calculate the odds. We answer, and we bring everything we have." The fleet launched on a Tuesday morning, Earth time, 30 ships accelerating past the moon, then engaging their FTL drives in synchronized bursts of light that looked like stars being born. They disappeared from Earth's sensors, carrying humanity's response to a desperate call from strangers 8 months distant. Behind them, Earth watched and waited, hoping they had made the right choice. The council chamber floated in the void between stars, a monument to peace that had lasted 3,000 years. Inside, Ambassador Talon watched his hands shake as he placed the data tablet on the speaker's platform. His gray skin had lost its usual blue shimmer. Dark circles marked his eyes from weeks without proper sleep. Behind him, the last 12 members of his delegation stood silent, their formal robes torn and stained with ash from their burning worlds. 17 civilizations, Talon said, his voice carrying through the vast circular room. The Devourers have consumed 17 civilizations in less than a year. Billions of lives. Gone. The representatives of 40 species sat in their elevated seats around the chamber, watching him with expressions ranging from pity to cold indifference. Counselor Britt, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns, leaned forward in her seat. Her species, the Lumens, had lived for 10,000 years without knowing war. They saw violence as a disease of primitive minds. "Ambassador, we have heard your testimony. Brit said, her voice like wind chimes. The Coalition grieves for the Ralnathi people, but military intervention would only mark us all for destruction. The swarms cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be stopped. They can only be survived by avoiding their notice. Talon felt something break inside his chest. He had expected this answer, but hearing it still felt like falling from a great height. Survival through hiding? My people have 3 worlds left. 3. In 2 months we had 47 colonies across 16 systems. Now we huddle on 3 planets waiting to die, and you ask us to accept this? A delegate from the Deepkin, an aquatic species whose tank bubbled softly as he spoke, raised a webbed hand. The Coalition has strict rules about engaging existential threats. We cannot risk the safety of trillions for what? Talon interrupted, his voice rising despite protocol. For one species? For my species? Say it clearly. You have decided we are not worth the risk. Silence filled the chamber. No one met his eyes. These were species that had evolved on peaceful worlds, where predators were rare and survival came easy. They had built their civilization on trade and knowledge, not struggle. The concept of fighting to the death was alien to them, something from primitive history they had long outgrown. Brit spoke again, softer this time. The Coalition will offer refugee status to any Ralnathi who wish to relocate. We have processing centers ready on 4 worlds. Medical care, housing, education for your young. It is not nothing. It is extinction with better furniture, Talon said quietly. He looked down at his data tablet, scrolling through files he had reviewed 100 times. Information gathered from every corner of Coalition space, searching for anything that might help. There had to be something, someone, anyone willing to fight. Then he saw it again. The file he kept returning to, even though it made no sense. Survey Report 7743E, filed 240 years ago by a science vessel mapping the outer rim, a planet called Earth, orbiting an average yellow star in a system labeled Sol. The report was brief, clinical, noting a pre-spaceflight species in early industrial development. But there were notes in the margins added by the survey captain. Personal observations that had struck Talon as odd when he first read them. Recommend extreme caution if future contact is established. This species evolved as persistence predators on a high-gravity deathworld with extreme climate variance. Observed constant tribal warfare, despite having developed nuclear weapons capable of planetary extinction. Psychology appears fundamentally different from Coalition norms. Advised quarantine until species either achieves stability or destroys itself. Update. Intelligence suggests they nearly achieved global extinction in 2047 but pulled back from the brink. Remarkable restraint for a species this aggressive. Deathworld. Persistence predators. Constant warfare. These were not words that appeared in surveys of Coalition species. Their worlds were gardens. Their evolution had been gentle. But Earth, it seemed, had forged its dominant species in fire and struggle. Talon looked up at the council. There is one option we have not discussed. Brit's light patterns shifted to confused colors. Ambassador, we have reviewed every military option. There is no force in Coalition space capable of— Not in Coalition space, Talon said. He activated his tablet, projecting the survey report into the air above the speaker's platform. The image of Earth appeared, a blue and white marble hanging in darkness. The species, the humans, they come from a world that might prepare them for what we face. The chamber erupted in confused murmuring. A Chitara delegate, her insectoid features clicking in agitation, stood from her seat. You propose contacting a quarantined species? One that has not even achieved faster than light travel? Ambassador, your desperation has clouded your judgment. Perhaps, Talon admitted, but they survived their own apocalypse. They are still alive despite every logical reason they should have destroyed themselves. And according to this report, they evolved to hunt prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. They are predators who never give up. Brit shook her head, light dimming. Even if we approved contact, which we will not, they lack the technology to help you. They have no fleet, no weapons capable of interstellar warfare. This is fantasy, Ambassador. Talon gathered his tablet and bowed formally to the council, the gesture of a diplomat acknowledging dismissal. His delegation followed him toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at the 40 species who had condemned his people to death through inaction. You are correct, he said. They are primitives. They are violent. They are everything the Coalition has evolved beyond, but they are also the only species I have ever heard of that chose to step back from self-destruction, instead of falling into it. That choice required something none of our species possess. I do not have a word for it in your languages. He did not wait for a response. Outside the chamber, floating in his small diplomatic shuttle, Talon composed a message. He knew it was forbidden to contact quarantined species. He knew it would cost him his position, possibly his freedom. But his people were dying, and the civilized galaxy had decided that was acceptable. He entered the coordinates for the Sol system and began typing in the human language the survey team had partially decoded. The message was simple. We are dying. We have no one else to ask. If you can hear this, please help us. Then he pressed send and watched the message disappear into faster-than-light transmission, carrying the last desperate hope of his species toward a small blue world, where monsters who called themselves humans had somehow learned to control their violence long enough to reach for the stars. The Ralnathi colony of Tal Shari was burning when the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Diana Reed stood in the tactical center of the flagship, watching the display show what the swarms were doing to a living world. Massive organic ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest vessels, surrounded the planet like flies on a corpse. They were pulling resources directly from the surface: metal, water, biological matter, feeding the endless hunger that drove them from system to system. How long do they have? Diana asked the sensor officer. Based on current consumption rates, maybe 4 days before the biosphere collapses completely. The 2 other colonies in the system have already gone dark. Admiral Torres had stayed on Earth, placing fleet command with Admiral Okonkwo, a calm woman who had served in the African Union space defense before unification. She studied the tactical display with an expression that gave nothing away. 30 ships against that. The numbers are not favorable. They never are, Diana said. She pulled up the communication protocols they had prepared, the translation matrix based on the Ralnathi message. Let them know we are here. Use every frequency. The message went out, broadcast across all known communication channels. This is the United Earth Fleet responding to your distress call. We have come to help. Please respond. For a long moment, nothing. Then a weak signal came through, voice only, distorted by interference. When the translation software processed it, a male voice filled the tactical center, shaking with emotion. You came. By all the stars, you actually came. This is Ambassador Talon, Ralnathi Diplomatic Corps. We did not think anyone would answer. Diana took the communication headset, speaking clearly. Ambassador, we received your message 8 months ago. We came as fast as we could. What is your tactical situation? Desperate, Talon said bluntly. The swarms have consumed 44 of our worlds. We have 3 left, and they are all under siege. Our defense fleet was destroyed weeks ago. We have evacuation ships trying to pull civilians from the surface, but the swarms hunt them down. Millions are trapped. We thought we had days left at most, then you appeared. What forces did you bring? Diana exchanged a look with Admiral Okonkwo. 30 ships, 4,000 personnel. We are not a large fleet. The silence from the other end stretched. When Talon spoke again, his voice was thick. You crossed space for 8 months to help a species you have never met, knowing you were outnumbered. I do not have words in my language for what that means. Thank you. Even if we all die here, thank you for coming. We did not come here to die, Diana said. We came here to fight. Send us everything you have on the swarms. Behavior patterns, adaptation speeds, anything that might help. Over the next 2 hours, data flooded the human fleet. The Ralnathi had been documenting the swarms for months, watching them destroy civilization after civilization. The information painted a nightmare picture. The swarms were not ships piloted by individuals. They were living vessels, grown from organic matter, controlled by a hive intelligence that learned from every encounter. Hit them with lasers and they developed heat-resistant hulls. Hit them with plasma and they adapted shielding. They were evolution weaponized, getting stronger with every species they consumed. They have never faced kinetic weapons at this scale, noted Lieutenant Harris, the fleet's tactical analyst. The Ralnathi and most coalition species use energy-based weapons. Clean, efficient, precise. They do not throw chunks of metal at high velocity. Because they evolved past that, Diana said. They see it as primitive. But we have been refining kinetic warfare for thousands of years. How fast do the swarms adapt to physical impacts? According to the data, slowly. They develop armor plating, but it takes time. They are not built to handle sustained kinetic bombardment. Admiral Okonkwo made a decision. We hit them hard and fast. Nuclear-tipped missiles for the capital ships, railgun batteries for everything else. Diana, prepare your Marines. If we get an opening, we are going after those trapped civilians. The human fleet moved into attack formation, ships spreading across space in patterns learned from naval warfare on Earth's oceans. The swarms detected them immediately, dozens of organic vessels breaking from their feeding pattern to intercept. They moved wrong, not like ships but like living creatures swimming through space, propelled by biological processes humans did not understand. The first swarm ship opened fire with some kind of bioelectric weapon, bolts of lightning that arced across space toward the human fleet. The shots missed by hundreds of meters. The swarms had never fought something this small and maneuverable. Coalition ships were massive, slow, built for efficiency rather than combat. Human vessels were designed by a species that expected to fight. All ships open fire, Okonkwo commanded. 30 ships unleashed hell. Nuclear missiles streaked across space, detonating against swarm hulls and flowers of atomic fire. Railguns fired solid tungsten rods at a fraction of the speed of light, punching through organic armor like paper. The swarms reeled, their hive mind clearly shocked by the sudden violence. Diana watched the battle from the dropship bay, her Marines secured in their assault gear. They were using equipment designed for hostile environments on Earth, sealed suits that could handle vacuum, radiation, and extreme temperatures. Not specialized alien technology, just human engineering refined through necessity. A swarm ship broke through the fleet's defensive line, damaged but still dangerous, heading toward one of the Ralnathi evacuation vessels struggling to lift civilians from Talshari's surface. Diana made a decision without consulting anyone. Get us on that ship. If we take out its command center, maybe we can disable it. The dropship launched, tiny against the massive swarm vessel. They approached from below, using the planet's gravity to mask their approach. Up close, the swarm ship was horrifying. Pulsing organic matter, vents leaking bioluminescent fluids, surfaces that looked like exposed muscle tissue. The hull showed damage from railgun impacts, holes torn through the armor. There, Diana said, pointing at a breach. Set us down inside. The dropship slipped through the wound in the swarm's hull, landing in a chamber that dripped with organic material. 20 Marines deployed, weapons raised, helmet lights cutting through darkness that smelled like rot and electricity. The interior was not built for occupancy. No corridors or rooms, just biological tunnels that pulsed like arteries. They found the civilians by following the sounds of screaming. Deep inside the swarm ship, the creature had stored captured Ralnathi in some kind of organic holding chamber, preserving them for later consumption. 200 souls trapped in nightmare, watching their friends and family dissolved for nutrients. Diana's Marines cut them free using plasma torches, working fast while small swarm organisms, things like tumors with teeth, emerged from the walls to defend the ship. The fighting was brutal and close. Humans had trained for urban combat, for fighting in tight spaces where every corner might hide an enemy. These tunnels were just another battlefield. They got the civilians to the dropship packed in tight, some of them unconscious from shock. A Ralnathi female, her gray skin pale with fear, grabbed Diana's arm. You are human? From the deathworld? Earth, yes, Diana confirmed, helping her into the ship. You came into this thing to save us. You board a swarm ship. No one does that. Everyone knows you cannot board a swarm ship. Diana checked her weapon, preparing to cover the evacuation. We did not know that. Probably better that way. The dropship launched, carrying its load of rescued civilians. Behind them, the swarm ship was still functional, still hunting. Diana's demo specialist had left explosives throughout its interior. Timed charges placed near what looked like major organs. They detonated as the dropship cleared the hull, tearing the swarm vessel apart from inside. The battle lasted 6 more hours. Humans took losses, 4 ships severely damaged, hundreds wounded, 63 dead. But the swarms took worse. They were built to fight civilized species who used elegant weapons from safe distances. They were not prepared for a species that treated space combat like knife fighting, that closed distance instead of maintaining it, that used nuclear weapons like conventional explosives. When the swarm fleet finally retreated, pulling back from Tal Shari to regroup, the humans had saved one colony world and bought time for the other 2. 2,000 Ralnathi civilians were alive who should have died. Ambassador Talon met Diana in the docking bay of the human flagship, his delegation behind him. He looked at her like she was something from legend. "You boarded a swarm ship," he said, his voice full of awe and horror. "You went inside and fought it from within." Diana removed her helmet, showing her face, young but hard, marked with scars from Earth's wars. "You called for aid, we came. This is what humans do when someone needs help. We do not calculate odds. We do not debate safety, we answer. And we fight like everything depends on it because it does." Talon reached out slowly and Diana clasped his hand in the way humans greeted each other. The ambassador felt the strength in her grip, the calluses from weapons training, the steady pulse of someone who had seen death and kept moving forward. "The galaxy," he said quietly, "is going to be very surprised by your species." Diana smiled, tired but fierce. "Good, let them be surprised. We are just getting started." The data packet arrived at the Coalition Council chambers 3 days after the battle at Tal Shari. Counselor Britt was reviewing trade agreements when her assistant interrupted, something that rarely happened except for emergencies. The assistant's crystalline surface showed nervous color patterns, flickering between blue and orange. "Counselor, you need to see this. It concerns the Ralnathi situation." Britt accessed the file, expecting another plea from Ambassador Talon or perhaps final death records from their colonies. What she found instead made her entire body flash white with shock. Combat footage, sensor readings, tactical analysis, and a brief message from Talon. "We called for aid," someone answered. "They are called humans." She watched the footage 4 times, unable to process what she was seeing. Ships smaller than anything in the Coalition fleet, moving with impossible agility. Weapons that threw solid matter instead of energy. Nuclear detonations used casually like conventional munitions. And most disturbing of all, footage from inside a swarm vessel showing bipedal creatures in armor, fighting through organic tunnels to rescue Ralnathi civilians. The creatures moved like predators, fast and efficient, showing no hesitation about entering an environment that should have paralyzed them with fear. Britt called an emergency council session. Within hours, representatives from all 40 Coalition species gathered, confused and concerned. She played the footage without comment, letting them watch humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. The chamber fell silent except for the sounds of weapons fire and explosions echoing from the display. When it finished, a deepkin counselor spoke first, his voice bubbling with confusion. "What species is this? They are using technology we abandoned thousands of years ago as too dangerous and inefficient. Those are fission weapons, kinetic accelerators, chemical propellants. This is like watching our ancestors fight." "They are called humans," Britt said. "From a quarantine system in the Outer Rim, survey report classified them as pre-spaceflight primitives from a deathworld. That survey was filed 240 years ago. Apparently, they have developed significantly since then." A Chitara representative clicked her mandibles in agitation. "Talon contacted them? He violated quarantine protocols? This is grounds for what?" Britt interrupted. "For punishment?" His species was days from extinction. He sent a desperate message to the only species he thought might help. And they came. "Look at the tactical data. 30 ships against a swarm fleet that destroyed our best military forces. They won. They pushed the swarms back. They saved Tal Shari." The council erupted in argument. Some demanded the humans be returned to quarantine immediately. Others wanted more information. A few, very quietly, wondered if humanity might be convinced to help with other swarm threats throughout Coalition space. Britt silenced them with a flash of bright light. "We need to understand what we are dealing with. I am sending a diplomatic mission to make formal contact. We need to learn about these humans before we decide anything." The mission launched 2 days later, carrying Britt and a small delegation. They traveled to Tal Shari, where the human fleet remained in orbit, helping with evacuation efforts and repair work. As they approached, Britt studied the human ships through her vessel's sensors. They were strange things, bulky and inelegant, built with armor instead of shields, carrying weapons that seemed almost barbaric in their simplicity. But they had worked. Against an enemy that had consumed 17 civilizations, primitive human weapons had worked. Ambassador Talon greeted them personally, his mood dramatically improved from their last meeting. "Counselor Britt, thank you for coming. I apologize for violating protocols, but as you can see, the decision was not made lightly." "I am not here to punish you," Britt said, her light patterns showing sincerity. I am here to meet the humans, to understand what they are and why they did something no coalition species would consider. Talon led her to the human flagship, where Admiral Okonkwo received them in a conference room that smelled of recycled air and something else. Humans produced scents constantly, chemical signals that Brit's sensors struggled to interpret. The Admiral was tall for her species, dark-skinned, with expressive features that showed intelligence and wariness. Counselor Brit, Okonkwo said, speaking through a translation device the humans had built surprisingly quickly. Welcome to the EDS Unity. I understand this is formal first contact between our species and your coalition. It is, Brit agreed. Though I must say humans have made quite an impression. We have many questions about your species and your capabilities. I imagine you do, Okonkwo said dryly. We are learning that galactic civilization has some very different ideas about warfare and intervention than Earth does. Over the next several hours, Brit learned about humanity. She learned about Earth, a world of extreme climates and dangerous predators where survival required constant vigilance. She learned about human history. 10,000 years of warfare that culminated in a near-extinction event. She learned how humans almost destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons, pulled back from the brink and spent 30 years unifying their species to reach for space. Most disturbing of all, she learned that humans saw nothing unusual about their response to the Ralnathi distress call. You risked your entire fleet for strangers, Brit said, struggling to understand. You had no guarantee of success. The logical decision was to remain hidden and safe. Why did you come? Okonkwo was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Counselor, my grandmother lived through Earth's nuclear war. She watched her city burn. She survived in refugee camps where people ate insects and drank contaminated water, because there was nothing else. She told me once that the worst part was not the bombs or the radiation or the starvation. The worst part was knowing that no one was coming to help. That humanity was alone in the universe, dying by its own hand, and no one cared. When we received the Ralnathi message, we had a choice. Be the species that hides while others face what we faced, or be the species that answers when someone calls for help. The choice was obvious. Obvious, Brit's light pattern showed confusion. You could have all died. You still might if the swarms return in greater numbers. Yes, Okonkwo agreed simply, but we would have died trying to help. That matters to humans. How we act when things are hardest defines who we are. Brit struggled with the concept. Coalition species made decisions based on preservation and efficiency. The idea of deliberately risking destruction for ethical reasons was alien to their thinking. Your species is very strange, she said finally. We know, Okonkwo said with a slight smile. We frighten ourselves sometimes. But we learned hard lessons about what happens when good people do nothing. We will not make that mistake again. The diplomatic mission returned to Coalition space with detailed reports that circulated through all 40 member species. The response was mixed. Some species were horrified by human casualness about violence. The footage of Marines boarding the swarm ship, played repeatedly on Coalition news networks, analyzed by experts who could not understand the psychology that would drive someone to enter such danger willingly. But other responses came too. Quiet messages to Brit's office from species living near swarm territory, requests for human military advisors, questions about whether Earth would sell weapons. A few species, those old enough to remember when their ancestors faced existential threats, expressed something close to admiration. On a Deepkin colony world threatened by swarm scouts, citizens gathered to watch the battle footage from Tal Shari. A young Deepkin named Sula watched humans fighting in the dark tunnels of a living ship and felt something she had never experienced before. Her species had evolved in peaceful oceans where predators were rare. They had no concept of the kind of courage it took to face terror and keep moving forward. But watching these aliens from Earth, she began to understand. They are afraid, she said to her clutchmate. Look at their biological readings. Elevated heart rates, stress hormones, all the signs of fear. But they still go forward. How do they do that? Her clutchmate had no answer. It was not something their peaceful evolution had prepared them to understand. Meanwhile, on Earth, news of the successful intervention spread across the planet. The 63 dead were mourned in ceremonies broadcast worldwide. Their families received honors and the knowledge that their loved ones had died saving strangers 8 months' travel from home. Public opinion remained divided, but something had shifted. Humanity had taken its first step onto the galactic stage, and it had done so by choosing compassion over safety. In the Coalition Council chambers, Brit compiled a formal report on humanity for the official record. She wrote about their deathworld origins, their violent history, their strange psychology that combined aggression with altruism. She noted their technological primitiveness and their tactical sophistication. She documented everything they had done at Tal Shari, every decision that should have led to their destruction but instead led to victory. At the end of the report, she added a personal observation that would be quoted across the galaxy in the months to come. Humans are what we might have been if our evolution had been harder. They scare us because they show us what survival really costs. They came from darkness and chose to bring light to others. The Coalition has existed for 3,000 years without facing what humanity faced in their first 50 years of atomic capability. We are not certain yet if this makes them dangerous or valuable. Perhaps they are both. Perhaps that is the point. The report concluded with a recommendation that shocked many who read it. Brit proposed that humanity be granted provisional Coalition membership with full military cooperation against the swarm threat. It was unprecedented, a species moving from quarantine to membership in a matter of weeks. But as Brit noted in her conclusion, unprecedented times required unprecedented responses. The vote would come soon. But across the galaxy, everyone was already talking about the humans who had crossed space to answer a cry for help, who had boarded a swarm ship because no one told them it was impossible, who had brought weapons the civilized galaxy had abandoned and used them to save lives. The galaxy was taking notice, and nothing would be the same. 3 months after the battle at Tal Shari, the swarms returned with vengeance. Their hive intelligence had analyzed the human tactics, adapted their approach, and come back with 3 times the force. Now they surrounded Ralnath Prime itself, the Ralnathi homeworld where 8 billion souls waited for either rescue or extinction. The humans held orbit, their fleet reduced to 24 ships after repairs and losses. 6 human vessels had been too damaged to continue fighting and limped back toward Earth with wounded crew. Diana Reed stood in the tactical center, studying the display with growing dread. The swarm fleet was massive, over 200 organic vessels, some of them larger than anything they had faced before. The human fleet was outnumbered nearly 10 to 1, and this time the swarms were ready for their tactics. The enemy had grown thicker armor, adapted to kinetic impacts, and learned to predict human attack patterns. "We cannot win this," Lieutenant Harris said quietly, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Not with these numbers. Even if we throw everything at them, they will overwhelm us through sheer mass." "Then we do not try to win through force," Diana said. She had been thinking about this for days, reviewing every bit of tactical data, studying the swarm's behavior. "We win through deception. Humans invented that before we invented agriculture. It is time we reminded everyone what that means." Admiral Okonkwo listened to Diana's plan with an expression that shifted from skepticism to grim approval. The plan was insane, risky, and would likely cost them half the fleet. It was also the only chance they had. "You are proposing we fake a retreat? Lure them into a trap?" "The swarms are predators," Diana explained. "Everything they do is about consumption and efficiency. They pursue fleeing prey. If we make them think they have broken us, they will chase. And when they chase, they become focused, less cautious. That is when we hit them with everything we have left." "And the biological weapon?" Okonkwo asked, referring to the most controversial part of the plan. "We need to disrupt their hive mind communication," Diana said. "They coordinate through some kind of organic signal network. Our scientists studied the tissue samples we recovered from the boarding action. They think they can engineer a virus that targets that communication structure specifically. It will not kill the swarms, but it might confuse them long enough for us to do real damage." The plan required volunteers for a suicide mission. 30 Marines would board the largest swarm vessel, the one they had identified as the primary coordination hub, and deploy the biological weapon directly into its central nervous structure. The Marines would almost certainly die. The swarms would tear them apart long before they could escape. Diana called for volunteers and received 300 applications. She chose her team carefully. People she had fought beside, people she trusted to finish the mission even if everything went wrong. She did not tell them they were probably not coming back. They already knew. The human fleet began its retreat on a Tuesday morning, pulling back from Ralnath Prime in what looked like panic. Ships broadcast false distress signals, Some vessels even vented atmosphere to look damaged. The swarms fell for it completely, their hive mind interpreting the retreat as prey behavior. The massive organic fleet surged forward, abandoning defensive formations to pursue. Diana watched from the command ship as the swarms chased them into a debris field left over from an ancient battle. Broken coalition vessels from previous swarm attacks drifted here, monuments to the 17 civilizations that had fallen. The humans had spent 2 weeks seeding this field with nuclear mines, each one disguised to look like natural debris. The swarms, focused on pursuit, did not notice the danger until it was too late. The mines detonated in a wave, nuclear fire blooming across space in synchronized destruction. The swarm fleet reeled, dozens of vessels crippled or destroyed in the opening seconds. The human fleet immediately reversed course, no longer retreating but attacking with everything they had. Railguns fired until their barrels glowed red, missiles streaked through the chaos. The humans fought like cornered animals because that was exactly what they were. In the confusion, Diana's dropship launched toward the swarm command vessel. It was enormous, a living ship the size of a city, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that might have been beautiful if they were not so terrifying. The vessel's hull showed scarring from the nuclear mines but remained functional, already beginning to heal its wounds. They approached through a cloud of debris, using destroyed swarm vessels as cover. The command ship had deployed defensive organisms, small flying creatures that hunted for threats. Diana's pilot flew like he was racing through a canyon, dodging and weaving, barely avoiding collision dozens of times. They reached the hull and cut their way inside using plasma torches, entering through a wound that leaked organic fluids into the vacuum. Inside was worse than the first boarding action. The command vessel was aware of their presence, sending defender organisms that looked like nightmares. Things with too many teeth, too many limbs, adapted specifically for close combat. Diana's Marines fought through corridors that pulsed like living tissue, using every tactic humans had learned from 10,000 years of warfare: fire and movement, suppressing fire, room clearing, urban combat techniques adapted for the interior of an alien horror. They lost soldiers with every step. Private Wong died covering their advance. Corporal Diaz took wounds that should have been fatal, but kept fighting through sheer will. Sergeant Palmer ran out of ammunition and switched to a combat knife, fighting defender organisms in hand-to-hand combat until his squad pulled him back. Deep in the vessel's core, they found what they were looking for: a chamber filled with neural tissue, the physical substrate of the hive mind's coordination functions. It pulsed with electrical activity, processing information from hundreds of swarm vessels. This was the brain of the fleet, the intelligence directing the attack on Ralnath Prime. Diana's team deployed the biological weapon, viral containers that shattered against the neural tissue and began spreading. The virus was elegant in its simplicity, engineered to target only the specific proteins the swarms used for communication. Within minutes, the neural chamber began convulsing, electrical patterns disrupting into chaos. "Time to leave," Diana said, backing toward the exit. But the command vessel knew what they had done. Defender organisms poured into the chamber from every direction, overwhelming their defenses. Diana's Marines formed a fighting retreat, losing soldiers with every meter. The ship itself seemed to be attacking them, walls constricting, floor surfaces becoming unstable. They almost did not make it. The dropship pilot, seeing their desperate situation, brought the ship directly into the swarm vessel, using the ship itself as a battering ram to break through internal barriers. Diana and the 12 survivors of her 30-person team stumbled into the dropship as defender organisms swarmed around them. The pilot launched before the door fully closed, escaping through an expanding rupture in the hull. Outside, the biological weapon was doing its work. The swarm fleet's coordination collapsed. Vessels that had been moving in perfect synchronization suddenly drifted without purpose. Some attacked each other. Others simply stopped functioning. The hive mind was not destroyed, but it was confused, fragmented. No longer the unified intelligence that had conquered 17 civilizations. The human fleet struck with everything remaining: nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, close-range attacks that would have been suicide against a coordinated enemy. Admiral Okonkwo commanded from the bridge of her battered flagship, pushing the fleet past safety limits, accepting casualties to press the advantage while it lasted. The battle raged for 6 more hours. Humans lost 11 ships outright, with every remaining vessel taking damage. Casualties climbed past 2,000. But the swarm fleet broke. For the first time in their expansion, they retreated not from tactical choice but from genuine defeat. The survivors fled into faster-than-light travel, abandoning Relnath Prime to the defenders. Diana's dropship returned to the flagship with its load of wounded Marines. She helped carry the injured to medical facilities, her armor cracked and stained with substances she did not want to identify. Someone told her the battle was won. She nodded numbly, too exhausted to feel anything except the weight of the soldiers who had not returned. Admiral Okonkwo found her in the medical bay, sitting against a wall watching medics work on Sergeant Palmer's wounds. The Admiral sat down beside her without speaking for a long moment. 18 soldiers did not come back from that ship, Okonkwo said finally. 18 people who volunteered knowing they probably would not survive. I need to write letters to their families, telling them their loved ones died 8 months from Earth, inside an alien nightmare, saving a species most humans did not know existed 3 months ago. They knew the cost, Diana said quietly. We all did. They went anyway because someone needed to. That is what we do. I know, Okonkwo said, but the cost keeps getting higher. We cannot keep doing this. We cannot keep throwing our people into these situations and watching them die. Diana looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Yes, we can. Because the alternative is watching others die while we stay safe. We already tried that back on Earth. It did not work. The only thing that saved us was finally deciding some things were worth fighting for, even at terrible cost. We taught the galaxy that lesson today. The swarms thought they were unstoppable. Now they know different. Relnath Prime celebrated below them 8 billion souls who would live because humans had decided their lives mattered. But on the human ships, the mood was somber. Victory had come at a price measured in friends and colleagues who would never go home. The fleet began rescue and recovery operations, pulling survivors from damaged vessels, treating wounded, preparing bodies for transport back to Earth. Ambassador Talon visited the flagship, moving through corridors that smelled of blood and burned equipment. He found Diana in the observation deck staring at Relnath Prime below. The ambassador stood beside her, his gray skin showing patterns of gratitude and sorrow. My species will remember this day for as long as we exist, he said. Humans came when no one else would. Humans fought when victory seemed impossible. Humans died so my people could live. We have no way to repay this debt. Diana shook her head. We do not want repayment. We want you to survive. We want you to rebuild. We want you to remember that when the darkness comes, someone will answer if you call for help. That is what the galaxy needs to learn. That is what we came here to teach. The battle was won. Relnath Prime was saved. But the war was not over. The swarms had retreated, but they would return. And next time they would be even more adapted, even more prepared. Humanity had bought time, but time was all they had bought. Still, as Diana looked at the planet below, alive and whole, she thought that maybe time was enough. Time for the galaxy to learn. Time for humans to show what they were capable of. Time for the civilized species of the Coalition to remember that sometimes survival required fighting, even when the odds were impossible. The humans had taught them that lesson in blood and fire. Now they would see if anyone was listening. The Coalition Council chambers had changed in the 3 months since Relnath Prime was saved. Where once 40 species sat in comfortable isolation, now delegates talked in clusters, exchanging tactical data, discussing defense agreements, arguing about military preparedness. The humans had done more than save one species. They had shattered the illusion that the galaxy could remain peaceful through passive observation, while threats like the swarms existed. Counselor Britt stood at the central podium, her crystalline body reflecting light in patterns that showed complex emotions humans were only beginning to understand. Before her sat representatives from all 40 Coalition species, along with 3 new faces, Admiral Okonkwo, Lieutenant Commander Diana Reed, and Ambassador Liu from Earth's diplomatic corps. The humans sat quietly, waiting for the decision that would determine their place in galactic civilization. 3 months ago, Britt began, her voice carrying through the chamber. This council dismissed the Relnathi plea for help. We calculated the risks and decided intervention was not logical. We were prepared to watch 8 billion souls die rather than risk our own safety. Then humans arrived. a species we had categorized as primitive, violent, barely capable of spaceflight. They crossed 8 months of space with 30 ships to answer a call we ignored. They fought an enemy that had destroyed 17 civilizations. They won. And in doing so, they forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about who we are and who they are. She paused, letting her words settle. The chamber was silent except for the soft humming of translation devices working in 40 different languages. I have spent 3 months studying humanity, Britt continued. Their history, their psychology, their evolution on a world they call Earth. What I learned disturbs me. They are violent. They are aggressive. They have spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare. They nearly destroyed themselves with weapons that still terrify us to contemplate. They are everything the Coalition has evolved beyond. And yet when a desperate species called for help, they came. Not because it was logical, not because they had something to gain, but because, in their words, it was the right thing to do. I do not fully understand their reasoning, but I understand the results. The Relnathi are alive because humans value life enough to die protecting it. A Deepkin delegate raised his webbed hand. Counselor, no one disputes that humans fought bravely, but their methods were brutal. They used nuclear weapons casually. They boarded living ships. They engineered biological weapons. These are tactics we abandoned as barbaric thousands of years ago. Are we prepared to welcome such a species into our coalition? Diana Reed stood before Britt could respond. Her presence commanded attention. Scarred, exhausted, a woman who had seen the worst the galaxy offered and survived it. With respect, Delegate, your species abandoned those tactics because you never needed them. You evolved on peaceful worlds. Your predators were small and manageable. Your environments were stable. Your evolution was gentle. Earth was not gentle. Earth tried to kill us every day. We learned to fight because fighting was the only way to survive. You call our methods brutal. We call them effective. The swarms do not care about your evolved sensibilities. They care about consumption. We stopped them with brutal methods because brutal methods work. The Deepkin delegate started to respond, but Ambassador Talon stood, commanding attention. He looked different now. Healthier, stronger, carrying himself with the dignity of someone who had witnessed salvation. I have listened to 3 months of debate about whether humans are too violent, too dangerous, too primitive for coalition membership. I have heard species who watched my people die argue that humans should return to their quarantine. So let me be clear. Humans are violent. They scare us. Their history terrifies us. But when my species faced extinction, when we were days from complete annihilation, humans came. They fought, they died. 18 of them gave their lives inside a swarm command vessel to deploy a weapon that saved my homeworld. 18 people who could have stayed safe on Earth. I do not care if their methods are brutal. I care that they work. I care that they value life enough to risk their own. The galaxy needs that right now. Counselor Britt resumed her position at the podium. The vote before us is simple. Do we grant humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Coalition, with full military cooperation rights? I vote yes. Not because humans are perfect, but because they showed us what we have become. Species so comfortable in peace that we forgot how to protect it. Humans remember. They remember that peace requires strength, that safety requires courage, that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do. We need that perspective. The galaxy needs what humans can teach us. The vote was not unanimous. Some species still feared humanity's violent nature. Others worried about what weapons humans might develop if given access to coalition technology. But when the final count came through, 31 species voted yes, 8 voted no, and 1 abstained. Humanity was now provisionally a member of the Galactic Coalition, the first species to move from quarantine to membership in less than a year. Admiral Okonkwo accepted the decision with quiet dignity. Earth is honored by your trust. We will do our best to earn it. But I must be clear about one thing. We came to this galaxy to help, not to conquer. We have no interest in dominating or controlling others. We simply want to ensure that when someone calls for help, someone answers. That is the galaxy we want to help build. The council session ended, but the real work was just beginning. Over the next weeks, coalition species began requesting human military advisors. The Chitara wanted to learn human tactics. The Lumens requested information about nuclear weapon design, despite their cultural aversion to such technology. A dozen species near swarm territory asked for protection agreements with Earth. Diana Reed found herself promoted to commander and tasked with forming the coalition's first joint species military unit. It was a strange assignment, teaching aliens how to fight when most of them had never experienced real combat. She started with basics, working with volunteers from 6 different species who wanted to learn what humans knew about warfare. The training was difficult. Coalition species were not built for the kind of sustained aggression humans took for granted. They tired quickly. They panicked under stress. They struggled with the concept of acceptable casualties. But they tried, and Diana gave them credit for that. They were stepping outside everything their evolution had prepared them for, learning skills their ancestors never needed, because they recognized the galaxy had changed. On Earth, the fleet returned to heroes' welcomes and somber memorials. The 63 dead from Tal Shari and the additional 287 from Relnath Prime were honored in ceremonies across the planet. Their names were added to monuments. Their families received support. Earth mourned its losses and celebrated its victories in the complicated way humans always had. Admiral Torres, watching from Geneva, saw the bigger picture developing. Messages were flooding in from across the galaxy, some from species facing swarm threats, others from civilizations dealing with different dangers. Pirates, rogue AI, territorial disputes that threatened to become wars. Everyone suddenly wanted human involvement, human protection, human solutions to problems the Coalition had ignored. "We cannot do this alone," Torres said during a strategy meeting with Earth's leadership. "Even if we built 100 ships, we cannot protect the entire galaxy. We are one species, one world, still learning how to operate beyond our own system." Ambassador Liu nodded. "We should not try to be the galaxy's military. That path leads to empire, and we know where that ends. Instead, we teach. We share what we know. We help species develop their own capabilities. We become partners, not protectors." It was the right approach, but it would take time. Time for the galaxy to adapt. Time for coalition species to learn that peace was not the absence of capability, but the choice not to use it. Time for everyone to adjust to the presence of humans. These strange, violent creatures from a death world who had somehow learned to channel their aggression into protection rather than conquest. 6 months after the Battle of Relnath Prime, Diana stood on the observation deck of Coalition Station Haven, watching ships from a dozen species conduct joint training exercises. Human vessels flew alongside Chitara scouts, Lumen cruisers, Deepkin carriers. They were learning to work together, combining the best of what each species offered. It was messy and inefficient and sometimes frustrating, but it was happening. Ambassador Talon found her there, as he often did. They had developed an odd friendship, the human warrior and the Relnathi diplomat, bonded by shared trauma and mutual respect. He stood beside her, watching the exercises with satisfaction. "My people are rebuilding," he said. 6 of our colony worlds are inhabitable again. Population is recovering. We have hope for the first time in a year. That is your gift to us." "We just bought you time," Diana said. "What you do with it is up to you." "We are using it well," Talon assured her. "And we remember who gave it to us. Humans will always be welcome on Relnathi worlds. Always. We are teaching our children about Earth, about the species that crossed space to help strangers. You are becoming legend to my people." Diana smiled slightly. "We are just people. We did what anyone should do when someone needs help." "That is what makes it legendary," Talon said. "The idea that helping others should be normal, expected, unquestioned. The Coalition is 3,000 years old, and we never learned that lesson. You taught it to us in 3 months. The galaxy is changing because of humans, not through conquest or force, but through example. You showed us what we could be." Later, Diana sent a message to Earth, updating Admiral Torres on the training progress and diplomatic developments. She included her personal observations about how Coalition species were adapting to human methods, which tactics were working, which required modification for non-human biology. At the end of the message, she added a personal note that Torres would share with Earth's leadership. "The galaxy was comfortable before we arrived. Comfortable with watching others suffer. Comfortable with calculating that intervention was too risky. We made them uncomfortable. We forced them to question their choices. Some resent us for it, but many are grateful. They are learning that compassion requires courage, that protecting others sometimes means risking yourself. That peace is not something you hide behind, but something you fight to preserve. These are human ideas born from our violent history and our choice to be better than our past. The galaxy needs these ideas right now. We came here to help one species. Instead, we might help change an entire civilization. That is worth the cost. That is worth everything we paid. Torres read the message in her office in Geneva, looking out at Earth below, the planet that had nearly destroyed itself, that had learned to unite and reach for space, that had decided helping others mattered more than staying safe. She thought about the soldiers who had died 8 months from home, the families who would never see their loved ones again. The price humanity had paid to teach the galaxy a lesson about courage and compassion was a heavy price. But watching the news feeds showing coalition species learning to defend themselves, seeing diplomatic missions from dozens of worlds arriving at Earth, reading reports about the swarms retreating from territories they had previously dominated, Torres thought maybe Diana was right. Maybe it was worth it. A communication came through from Admiral Okonkwo, still stationed at Haven with the remaining human fleet. Torres, we are receiving distress calls from 3 different systems. Swarm activity, pirate raids, and a territorial conflict that is escalating toward war. Everyone wants human intervention. What are our orders? Torres looked at the star map on her wall, showing human presence spreading across coalition space. 30 ships had started this. Now they had 60 with more under construction. Earth was building a fleet, training soldiers preparing for a role they had never anticipated. Not as conquerors, not as empire builders, but as the species that answered when others called for help. We cannot save everyone, Torres said into the communication, but we can try to save someone. Choose the situation where we can make the biggest difference, send what support we can to the others, and start training coalition forces to handle these situations themselves. We came here to help, not to create dependence. Teach them what we know, help them become capable. That is how we change the galaxy. Not by doing everything ourselves, but by showing others how to stand. Okonkwo acknowledged the orders and closed the connection. Torres sat alone in her office thinking about the path humanity had chosen. They had stepped onto the galactic stage not with dominance or submission, but with a simple statement. We will help because helping matters. That statement had resonated across 40 civilizations and was changing how the galaxy thought about responsibility and courage. Somewhere in the depths of space, the swarms were regrouping, learning from their defeats, preparing new strategies. More threats would come. More calls for help would arrive. More humans would die fighting to protect people they had never met. But Torres knew something now that she had not known a year ago. Humanity was not alone anymore. They had allies. They had friends. They had a purpose that extended beyond their own survival. The galaxy had called for aid. Humans had arrived with shock and awe. And in doing so, they had shown everyone what was possible when someone chose to care enough to fight. That was humanity's gift to the stars. Not weapons or tactics, but the simple, revolutionary idea that other people's lives were worth defending, even at terrible cost. It was an idea that would reshape everything. And it all started because one desperate ambassador sent a message to a species that should not have been able to help. And that species decided to try anyway.